I'm Drew Olnoff from TechCrunch, Community Director and Writer, and I have a special guest with me here today for TechCrunch TV. It's Matt Galligan, founder of Circa. It's an app that helps surface news in a new kind of way, and kind of chunked up in pieces and lets you follow an entire story. We wrote a piece about it, which we'll of course link to. But my example of the app is, when Felix jumped out from space, what Circa did was tie, news to it that made sense. Buzz Aldrin actually broke the sound barrier that same day at the ripe age of 80-something. And that's a piece of news that I wouldn't have known about. So with that, we're here with Matt, and it's a busy week for you guys, huh?
Oh my God, it's been a busy couple weeks actually, because we launched the company, and then basically the next day I was on a flight to Dublin for the Dublin Web Summit, and then I was there for founders, and then I came back, and it's like there we're featured in the App Store, and it was just nonstop, one thing after another. So I'm actually able to breathe again, which is great.
Well, that's good. And the different part about Circa, it's not like Google News aggregating. You guys have some human editors involved. Can you talk a little bit about how that works before we dive in?
We like to call them people.
That's fair enough. That's fair enough.
But yeah, so I mean, we built this because we wanted to be able to take news, boil it down into its core elements. So not summarize actually, but just like take the news, split it all up so that we knew the facts from the stats, from the quotes and all that kind of stuff, what we consider to be the atomic elements of news. Makes sense. Putting them back together and then presenting it in a beautiful format. And so we rely on editors to be able to create these things. Machine can't always figure out, okay, what's one fact versus another, and so we have the people in there to be able to address that directly. And then what we do is we have machines on the back end that kind of help those editors do their job correctly, and then publish whatever works we've put together.
Right. So it's like a new kind of news platform, and what I like is that I can dig in and then say, for example, I was going through the app, and we'll get to this, but with the election coming up, gas prices, hot topic, and of course the hurricane, is spiking that as well, and I'm able to go ahead and follow that story. I'm just that part. If I wanted to. So how are you guys handling all of the news that's coming in about Hurricane Sandy and the recovery, and of course the election?
Well, following stories is it's a brand new thing that we've introduced. Previously you could follow topic areas in different apps and stuff like that, where you could say, I want to know what's going on in, science, right? You just get big, large, flows of information. But what we wanted to do was create a service that actually worked for the user, not the reverse, right? So in the event that you were directly impacted by Sandy, or knew people that were impacted by Sandy, wanted to follow that story, it meant that when you hit follow, every time we wrote a new point, we just insert it in the old piece, as opposed to constantly writing new articles. And so there's this page that popped up on CNN, the 7 ways that you can follow Sandy with CNN, and it was just different blog posts and different articles and stuff like that. And you just it was a very manual process. And so
links
Circa,
all over the place.
It was, it's not, this is obviously just a holdover of the way that we've always done things. So by introducing following, it meant that whatever point you've finished reading a story and you want to hit follow to be able to stay on top of those updates, we're constantly pushing that stuff out there as much as we can. Obviously that creates, there can be issues with how much we put out there or how we keep track of everything. Well, so the way that we handle it is, basically there's systems in place that will constantly be searching for any sort of relevant information that may be updated about particular things within the app. And so we do have the machines helping identify new information to our editors, but it always goes back up to an editor. And the other aspect is, we know how popular a story is, obviously, by just tracking the analytics of how many people are actually following one story versus another. I can say, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that our #1 story in Circa that's ever been followed was the Hurricane Sandy story. And the user feedback that came through was just amazing. All the tweets that we got saying, oh, it was so helpful to be able to just get all of these updates the way that they were. It was really a cool experiment. I mean, it is an experiment. It's something that we've kind of invented and trying out and things like that. So going forward with the election, I think it's going to be really interesting to watch.
Yeah, how many people do you have editing right now?
So we've got 12 people actively on right now, looking to expand that team fairly quickly, actually. In fact, tech news is actually another thing that we want to get in there pretty soon. So, bringing somebody in to help spearhead that effort is going to be important, and obviously expanding our editorial team over time. But actually, the more we get our tools more efficient, the more efficient the editors are able to be as well.
Sure.
And so the better they can do at their job and produce more and more and more news without having to,
Right.
spend more time or bringing in too many more people.
Right.
As far as election coverage is concerned, we've pretty much got all hands on deck.
Yeah,
We're
I was
going to
going
be
to say,
writing.
are you moving people over?
Yeah, we've got so much content that we've got planned for tomorrow. And in fact, some of the stories are already in Circa so that people can get in there, follow those stories, and then just sit back and watch.
Right.
It's like
it's gonna be intense.
it is going to be intense. It's a very, very contested election in a number of ways, not just the presidential side, but also each state, each proposition, all these things. It's a very, very big election. So what we're doing is we've kind of created, we drew out a map of all the ways that we wanted to cover this information. And so we have our overarching story, then we've got, here is each state, and here is each major contested issue, here's each social issue.
Okay.
So you'll be able to get in and kind of get really granular with each individual topic that you might actually care about.
So people technically, commercial not promoting aside, something like Circa, you use it before you go out. You could use it before you go out to vote. Like you're standing in line, you've got your phone with you, and you're trying to get the updates on prop this, this, that, and the other thing. All right. Well, so here's one of the things. Since you guys did launch with world news and it wasn't tech, which we're all used to, how are some users reacting? Do you guys get nailed for bias? Do you get nailed for, oh, you're so pro-Obama, or you're pro-Romney, or you're whatever?
Well, the bias thing is really interesting because obviously, by us boiling things down to its core factual level, we try to get as literally as stripped down as possible, which means removing bias, removing leading sentences and stuff like that. So what's fascinating is we have people that email us with feedback that we're too biased left. And we have people that email us that we are too biased right. We have people that say, I can't believe you would support Romney on this issue. In the next token, I'm deleting this app and installing Fox News because I want the real news and things like that. What we've learned from that, though, is very important, which is that when we present a fact the way that it needs to be presented, again, in its most factual sense, stripped down, pared down sense, if people don't agree with that fact, they perceive bias. Right, and so it's perceived bias rather than actual bias.
Right.
So, having said that, we do have to be cognizant of that. We got to make sure we get in front of these issues and tell people, hey, look, this is the fact. Here is all of our data, and we do that also by citing sources.
Right.
So, we are the ones writing this content. We're not just pulling it from other sources, copying and pasting, and doing what people would consider just aggregation or curation. We are writing this stuff. So we do cite our sources on a point-by-point basis, so that people can always go back to the original source and know that it's.
So that's interesting. Okay. So how have you spoken to anyone at other publications, a CNN or something? Any feedback? Are they like, wow, how are you doing this? Are they looking for insight, or are people kind of just sitting back and watching? Like, how is the rest of the publishing digital world looking at what you guys are doing?
I think that there's a lot of people that are very intrigued by the process that we've developed and citing sources and things like that. But I also think there's an equal amount of confusion. And one of the things that we're doing within the app is actually changing the terminology that we use. Right now we use the terminology sources, but it's led people to believe that we are somehow literally sourcing that content from other places. And so we're actually changing that to citations to better represent what we're doing. And so there is a little bit of confusion right now. People do think we're aggregating, and nobody's really attacked us for that or anything like that. But we just want to get out in front of this problem in the belief that we are somehow stealing the content from others.
One of the things I wrote in my piece was that somebody like CNN, who has jumped into digital full force, has their own iPhone app. I have it on my phone. That this is definitely a style they could adopt. Now, there's other apps that are kind of a new one came out, Sumly. There are other apps that are kind of trying to do the bite-sized snacking. Can you kind of talk about how that space is? Or you guys just like heads down, full force?
No, I will definitely say we looked at approaches like what Sumly eventually built. I started working on this idea with Ben Ha, one of my co-founders, back in December of last year, and so. We identified a core problem, which is news is hard to read on the phone because it's a small device, limited attention span, all of these things. And so what we did was we started to look, okay, how can we address this issue? Well, summarization is certainly one of them. Taking an existing article and paring it down into a very small version, which is what Sumly does. What we ultimately ended up realizing was that we didn't want to settle for summaries.
Sure.
Because summaries lose something. You lose context, you lose details, you lose something important, and that's if you get the summary exactly right. Right? So, I mean, summaries have been done for 100 years. You know, this is not a new thing. And so what we wanted to do was really question everything about the way that articles even get written. And that's where we ended up getting to the idea of atomized news, breaking it down into its core elements, because you are stripping something away.
Sure.
But what you're stripping away is the fluff, the detail, the opinions, the bias, the conjecture, all of these things that, at least as far as reporting the news as it just is facts, just the facts, ma'am, and getting caught up really quickly.
And that's why Circa's focused on mobile.
Right.
You know, it's iPad, it's iOS.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Right.
And so what we wanted to do was create a new format, an entirely new format, not summarize, not any of that kind of stuff, to be able to get exactly the right information. You know, and look, some stories are going to be 3 points.
Right.
You know, just boom, 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 you're already through.
Sure.
Some are not going to be.
Right.
But what we don't want to do is prescribe a particular length to a story no matter what. Right. So you don't want to say, like, there's always going to be 400 words. Okay, that's great, but what if I needed 800 words, right? And who knows? And so what we do is we just created this atomized format that we think is frankly the best thing for mobile.
Right. No, and the app is really well done, and the scrolling is really interesting. Now, you're looking at data. I mean, can you tell us a little bit about how people are chewing this information up? Do a majority of people make their way all the way through the follow? Do they unfollow after they've had enough? And I guess the second part, I mean, how many bits of news have you guys pumped through the system since you've launched?
I mean, we've got hundreds of stories in there right now, which has been, I mean, it's been fascinating to watch the process and see. Some days are a little bit slower, some days are more about updating versus creating new stories. It's just, it's a really fascinating process. We're not even a month into this thing right now, and so I still want to digest a little bit about what we're doing, but there's a couple things that we've learned which is really fascinating. Number one, the follow mechanism is an incredibly just powerful, sticky mechanism with users. Because if they're able to follow a story, and right now it's only in the app that they can follow a story, hopefully we get an ability to follow stories from the web fairly soon, but the idea is they follow and it just comes to them. Right. And right now it means it's driving engagement big time. Right. An update comes out, automatically goes out to thousands of people that were happen to be following that story, and then in that one moment they're right back in the app. You know, it's not unlike when you receive a mention on Twitter. You know, you're going to go back to the app and you see what that mention is just to be able to respond to it.
Tagged on Facebook photo, right?
Exactly. But for news, it's a new thing because typically push notifications on news apps are like, here's the big freaking headline story that came out today. Right? And that's a limited engaged audience because maybe I don't care about that particular story.
News changes.
Back.
Things change quickly, especially with the hurricane and especially with the election.
Well, you'll take the marathon, for example, right?
Is it on? Is it off? Right.
So up until a certain few moments, it was known to be on. And then you saw all of the people that were doing traditional report, I mean, basically non-Circa style, whatever, old school style. You saw, oh, we're not sure. Rumored, you know, and then, but they had to do that as an interim before they can actually say the real thing, right?
That's interesting.
And so in our case, we just went 1, 2. It was not on, now it's on.
Right. So tomorrow, it's the election, all hands are on deck. And so people will be able to get the news, and I imagine there'll be a lot of them, so you'll definitely have to come back, let us know how it did, and interesting to see, you know, how many bits come through there, and you know, more so than any time ever news. I mean,
I have to say we launched at just the right time.
There you go.
So,
all right, thanks, Matt. Thanks for coming by, and good luck. Good luck tomorrow with the elections.
Appreciate that.